The PGA Tour season returned last week with Dustin Johnson cruising by 8 at Kapalua in the first of back-to-back Hawaii stops. We'll preview this week's Honolulu stop at the Sony Open with the latest stats, odds, and picks, including an update on Tiger's West Coast swing schedule as Prime Sports Golf, brought to you by ProGolfWeekly.com on the Prime Sports Radio Network, starts now. All right, it's Wednesday, the 10th of January, 2018. I'm your host, Greg DePalma. Thanks for joining us again for a great season of golf coverage, along with our partners at ProGolfWeekly.com. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. You'll receive our latest opinions and our on-demand programming alerts. I know a lot of you people, like me, we were very busy lives. We don't have time to listen to live shows, so we will let you know when the shows are available on demand, and the quickest way to know is to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. And again, don't forget all our programs are available not only on the website, but our pages at YouTube and iTunes under Prime Sports Network. Joining me each week are my co-hosts. And first, he's a PGATour.com contributor. You can find his first look reports every Friday prior to every event on the PGA Tour, Jeff Shane. And Jeff's, congrats on the DJ pick to break your cherry for 2018, my friend.
Well, as I had mentioned, it was hard to leave him on the table at the third pick. And I got to give you credit because you took Mark Leishman 2 picks ahead of me, and that was going to be my third pick. So I had to rethink it and decided to go with the world's #1 player. I'll also say this. I had the exacta last week because I also had John Rahm at runner-up.
It figures, right?
So,
yeah.
When it all comes at once, I suppose.
Uh-huh. Well, hey, maybe it's the beginning of a hot streak. So anyway, what do you think? I mean, it was interesting going into the final round, too, getting all of the media attention. You kind of figured it was going to happen. I think they must have referenced Dustin Johnson blowing the lead in, on the European Tour event, about a month or two ago. I think they referenced it maybe like 10 times. Yeah, I think they mentioned that like 10 times.
Yeah, they did. And I suppose when you have something like that in relatively close proximity, it's natural. And I don't remember how much we spoke about it on this particular show, but on some other appearances that I've made, the question was, well, how much is this going to scar Dustin Johnson to have blown a 6-shot lead on a Sunday? And I kept saying not much because he's one of the best at letting things roll off his back. And so, especially with a 2-month separation, he wasn't going, straight into another event in the next week or couple weeks, and had a chance to get away from everything and work on his game and fine tune some of his equipment in the days before Kapalua. In a sense, it made a lot of sense. And I think once we got to Saturday and he shot that 66, I think everybody had it in the back of their mind. He could do something serious. And Dustin, even though he lets it roll off his back, knew that he was not going to put himself in a position to blow another large lead on Sunday.
And it helped him as well because of the fact that a much easier golf course. As tough as the conditions were this past week, which we usually don't get those conditions with the wind, and it was good. It was good to have that. Fact is that's that golf course compared to where he played overseas, and the difficulty he had in the final round were like night and day. So even if your game was off a little bit, he still would have been fine. You would have thought it would have taken somebody to shoot real low to catch him. And then the other thing, too, is psychologically kind of feeling good about, come on. I mean, I shouldn't have any problems on this golf course if you're playing really well, and I'm sure that helped, too.
It did. And he not only was Dustin Johnson the only man in the field to break 70 all 4 days, he actually improved on his score every day as he felt more and more comfortable. And in particular, it was with his driver. And he said afterward that once he got comfortable with his driver, he knew that it was going to be a good week. And when Dustin Johnson is comfortable with his driver, if he's hitting it long and straight, watch out. He and Rory McIlroy might be the two guys that when they get those two components rolling, long and straight, it's going to be hard to beat them.
All right, now Tiger's schedule is out, so no surprises, right? Where he's starting at Torrey Pines, is he?
Yeah, no surprises at all. This is the schedule that he followed for 15 years on his career. He used to play a lot of West Coast events, and then he started scaling them back little by little. But he always started at Torrey Pines, and for good reason. He's won there 8 times, and
Sure.
and then for most years he went to Riviera. That's still, his childhood hometown event. Although Riviera has not been very kind to him, he's never won there in a dozen appearances. But considering that he's now the tournament host as well at Riviera, you knew that he was going to show up in some way, shape, or form. Last year he couldn't because of the injury, but absolutely no surprises that he's going to start at Torrey Pines. He's going to take a couple weeks off. He's not traveling, except perhaps back to Jupiter. And then he's going to tee it up again in Southern California. No overseas trips in this early part of the schedule. And I think maybe he learned something last year.
You would have to hope so. It sure sounds like it. All right. Also joining us from ProGolfWeekly.com, a weekly digital magazine covering pro golf around the globe, is ProGolfWeekly.com lead writer Joel Cook. And Joel, Justin Thomas is a defending champion this week. But after the way he's looked the last couple of events, not big events, but hey, still, Brooks Koepka is also not looking too good. But Justin Thomas is the defending champion to talk about this week. Is it time to worry about his game?
Well, I had Thomas in the thing last week. I don't think it's time to worry. He caught fire towards the end in the last round. He wasn't putting too well on those big slow greens at Kapalua, but traditionally, he's not like a phenomenal putter normally, but he's at least passable and then some. I don't think that the performance we saw there, like that's going to stick. It's kind of strange with Thomas. He had this reputation of being great as a defending champion, probably when he won the CIMB a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But, the first 2 times this year where he was the defending champion, he put pretty pedestrian numbers out there. But don't forget though, it's CIMB. He ended up finishing, I think it was P17 that week, which it never really challenged or anything. He won the very next week at that new event in South Korea. So he last year all he did was set the all-time lowest record in PGA Tour history. So obviously he's comfortable there. He did well with his mid-range game. He's still a phenomenal fit for it. I don't know.
So if you're playing fantasy golf, or of course we're going to get into our picks in just a minute, you're not so concerned, because this isn't you're only talking about 2 superstars in the field. It's a good field, but only 2 superstars in Spieth and Thomas.
Sure.
So you're not concerned then. You would if you have people out there that like to take Justin Thomas, just keep taking him.
Yeah, I mean, mildly concerned just in that most of the time he would look like the obvious pick just because of how he obliterated the field last year. But now I'm kind of looking at him like Spieth or Thomas. I think you can make a good case at either.
Okay.
He hasn't quite looked himself, but he's not someone I'd be worried about having in these things either.
All right, speaking of this week's event, the Sony Open in Honolulu at Wailea. And, Jeff, I guess the interesting trend is the trend about wanting to go with players that played the previous week at the Tournament of Champions. So that is something. Now, it's not 100%. I'm not sure. What is the percentage? What is it, like 75% maybe?
It's very close. I think it's 13 of 19 Sony winners since the Tournament of Champions moved to Hawaii, and that only goes back to 1999. Before that, it was played in California at a different time of year. But since we've kind of adopted this new schedule with the Hawaii 2-step right at the start in January, 13 of the 19 Sony winners have been players that played at Kapalua the week before. So you get a little bit of a running start. And honestly, I tend to look at this time of the schedule. Also, like at the Australian events, who played well there, who's got a little bit of momentum coming into January, even though we've had the break. And so I think that when you have this where you're going from Kapalua to Wailea, there are guys that, because of their status as a winner, have had the chance to have a running start, as opposed to a lot of the other guys in the field are newcomers, rookies, or guys, that just, like to come and play in Hawaii. But I think it definitely helps to have 4 rounds under your belt.
Yeah, that does. I mean, it does seem almost too obvious that, especially coming off the break, that a player. It's sort of like when we talk about in any sporting event, when you talk about like say even in the NFL, the bye week is nice, but they're usually rusty in the first half when you're facing a team that didn't have the break. So it's the same thing. And that doesn't, again, it's not 100%. It's not anything, but I think this percentage is 68. So it's about 68% of the winners when the first 2 events of the season have been in Hawaii, the winner has come from playing in the Tournament of Champions. Now, no Dustin Johnson this week, so he's taking the week off. Who else is noticeably absent? I know, of course, Mickelson's out, but as superstar players, who's noticeably absent?
Yeah, something that we probably knew in the back of our heads, but we got it confirmed this week, is Phil Mickelson has never played the Sony Open. Even when he played the Tournament of Champions, he never stayed in the second week because he has such an affinity for the California event and success that he put his focus there. But Bones Mackay, his longtime caddy, who they separated last year, but he's caddying for Justin Thomas this week on a temp gig. But Bones has never scouted Wile since 1992 when he was working for somebody else. But that's a little aside. But we don't see John Rahm, we don't see Ricky Fowler, we don't see Koepka. Interestingly enough, the Sony Open does have a number of spots for Japanese players, but Hideki Matsuyama isn't one of them this week, which I find a little bit interesting. But that's a little bit of the missing group here.
What were you saying there, Joel?
Oh, is Koepka still counted as notable?
Yes, he should. After last week, I'm not so sure, but yes, he's notable. What do you think is going on with him the last couple of events? Boy, talk about not being on his game.
Yeah, I need to burn that tape of where I took him ahead of Dustin Johnson with my 3rd pick last week. He was such a perfect fit for that course, but it seems like there's some mystery injury that kind of started surfacing over the weekend. Maybe it's not one he just started having, but just starting to be reported. So there may be some issue there. But yet, dead last, no one was really even close to him.
Okay. A mystery injury. Interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on whether or not we see him anytime soon then, for sure. Because that's a player that definitely people playing fantasy if you're getting ready to play a fantasy game for the year, then you might want to definitely be thinking about bypassing Brooks Koepka for now, just to be sure. He's never had any injury history, has he, over his career?
Actually, he had a very severe, I think it was a wrist or shoulder injury. I want to say he swings so hard. I think he popped something in his rib cage or his shoulder or something like that in his first year out on tour, and it really affected him. I remember him trying to play through it at the Masters, and he was just in such agony trying to get through the final 18 holes at Augusta. And then he took a significant time off to let that injury heal. So he does have a little bit of an injury history. It's just, as Joel mentioned, it's just very odd that not only did he finished last by 4 shots, and that came after finishing last at the Hero World Challenge. And you think with the Hero World Challenge, okay, he's coming off break, he's not really mentally into it, and he probably didn't prepare all that thoroughly for it. But this one counted. And his performance left a lot to be desired. And I'm kind of with you. It's a mystery for now, and yet it may be something that's very quickly fixable if it's just a small swing flaw or alignment or something like that.
Yeah, that was the analysis that Joel had last week on Brooks, the one that you just mentioned. It's just the Hero World Challenge. But
yeah, that's how I looked at it.
Yeah, that's how you looked at it. But that didn't work.
I'll give it a little more stock next year.
All right. Okay, so what do we know about this golf course, Joel? What do you know about this golf course? Do you like the golf course? Do you enjoy watching this event?
If you like scoring, yeah. It's shorter than last week. Well, we're back down from par 73 to par 70, just over 7,000. yards. It's kind of one of those shot makers courses, not terribly long. It's Bermuda grass. You need people that can score this week, people who can are hitting greens and putting well.
Okay. Jeff, anything about this golf course that you like? Any memories? Anything in particular?
Well, one of the interesting factors about this golf course is it dates all the way back to 1927. It was one of the first golf courses in Hawaii. It was built to kind of develop the tourism industry, and they hired Seth Rayner as a designer. And Seth Rayner's a pretty prominent designer of that era, but he did a lot of borrowing of features of other prominent golf courses and kind of left them as Easter eggs, so to speak, at Wailea. The first hole bears a little bit of a resemblance to the road hole at St. Andrews with its proximity to a building there. One of the other greens has this big gully in the middle of it. It's called a Biarritz green, and you find that at some places over in Europe. The Redan green, the sharply sloping back to front type green is at number 7. So for those that are kind of into golf course architecture and interesting quirks from other holes, you might recognize a few of them at Wailea.
All right, sounds good. So, and this is a decent field, isn't it? Just like we were talking about with some of the players that have decided to come back and play the Tournament of Champions after not having the greatest of fields just several years ago. We're seeing a kind of a carryover too, right? So this is a pretty decent field, especially when you get 2 superstars.
It is, and yet we're a little top heavy. We have Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas, and then you drop all the way down to number 23 in the world ranking for your 3rd highest ranked player, that being Brian Harman. And then after that, you start to pick up some names in the low 20s, Schauffele, Kisner, Berger, but there's a big gap between the top 2 and everybody else.
All right, so let's get right to the picks, the latest odds and so forth, starting first of all with the 2 favorites, the 2 stars we've been talking about, Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. Jeff, you have the first pick, coincidentally, coming off your first win with Dustin Johnson last week. So Spieth has actually played there a couple times. She was 3rd last year. That's his best finish, and everybody remembers what happened, or at least, if you're a diehard, you remember what happened with him. Who was he out there with? Lovemark, when he got knocked over on his little dinghy when he was fishing? Do you remember? Was it Lovemark? I think it was Lovemark, wasn't it? I think it was.
I don't remember the pairing, to be
the pairing that got knocked over in the ocean.
Yeah.
So anyway, Justin Thomas is again the defending champ, but Spieth is 5-1. Thomas is 8-1. So that's the thing. And Thomas also has a new caddy this week, doesn't he? Just for 1 week.
Well, he's got bones this week, and I don't know how long that's going to last. But Jimmy Johnson, his regular caddy, who is one of the best caddies out on tour, he's dealing with plantar fasciitis right now. And walking is just difficult. He went 2 rounds at Kapalua last week and was really, really struggling. So Justin Thomas actually used his dad on the weekend as a caddy, and I guess at some point, he ran into Bones on the course, and Bones was doing his television work, and why not? See if he's doing anything next week, and so they decided to strike it up. I don't know if this is a 1-week thing. I don't know what Justin Thomas's schedule is going forward and how that might mesh with what Bones is doing for Golf Channel, but if you got to get a stand-in, that's a pretty good stand-in to get.
All right. Well, what do you think? I asked Joel about his confidence on Justin Thomas. What do you think, since you're making the first pick, about Thomas and the way he's played, defending champ, dominated this specific golf course, but he does have a different caddy, but maybe that's an advantage with all the experience Bones has here. Or what about Jordan Spieth, who just continues to play steady, solid golf? Or do you go to someone else?
I'm going to go with Jordan Spieth, and I know that Jordan has not won at Wailea, but he was solo 3rd last year, And really, as compared to Kapalua, this would seem to be a better fit for Jordan Spieth's game. He doesn't have to be a bomber here. He can utilize his shot making and his putting and make that work. And so I think that he's got a little bit better chance here. Also, last week, he shot that opening 75 at Kapalua, but rounds 2, 3, and 4, if you take Dustin Johnson out of the equation, rounds 2, 3, and 4, that was the best. He matched the best 3-round score for those final 3 rounds of everybody not named Dustin Johnson. So he does come in with a certain amount of momentum. This is a course that's going to fit him a little bit better, and he's got some confidence with tying for third last year. My thing with Thomas isn't so much that he's got a different caddy, but he has had some kind of pedestrian results. I think he's kind of getting used to being in that spotlight now. Justin Thomas was a nice young player a year ago. Now he's the reigning player of the year. He's dealing with that a little bit. And I've also just found, kind of doing some research, that guys that shoot 59 at a place, or guys that set scoring records at a certain place, they have a hard time conjuring up the same kind of magic the following year, whether it's Al Geiberger at Memphis or David Duval at the old Bob Hope, Steve Stricker when he went really, really low. He might be the exception because he did win 3 John Deeres in a row, but by and large, guys that set the scoring record on fire really struggle coming back to the same place the following year.
All right, there you go. So there's some trend information there to get you ready for this week's event for Justin Thomas, whether you like him or not. I am going to go ahead with my second pick, and I am going to stick with my pick from last week and go, why not, Mark Leishman. The reason I went with Mark Leishman, as I mentioned last week, he had been playing really well, and he's continuing to play really well. He's got 5 top 10s, 4 top 5s, a runner-up and a win over his last 7 events, 7th last week. He had the lead there for a little while, but he had a really bad third round, which completely ruined his chances. Other than that, he seemed to play pretty well. He's had a decent history here. Nothing great, nothing bad, but matter of fact, most of the time he plays here, he's kind of hovering in the top 25 with a couple top 10. So that's enough for me. I love the odds as well in this field at 14-1. 12th player in the world right now, so Mark Leishman will be my top pick at 14-1, Joel. And what about you? Who do you like? Because you've got we started the conversation off with Justin Thomas, so you can still take him if you like, unless you want to go with someone else, including maybe Brian Harman, which I know you've taken an awful lot of lately, and he seems to be playing really well.
Well, if you'd asked me 3 minutes ago, I would have done unequivocally Justin Thomas. So Jeff got me thinking this over.
Uh-oh.
It's actually looking pretty. I mean, it's looking pretty tight. I got the Alabama guy and Justin Thomas, and then the 2 Georgia guys. The 3 there, Harman and Kisner, are really interesting at this spot. That's what I thought I was going to be picking between Harman and Kisner. Harman's been more consistent lately. He's been better form lately, but Kisner had that 60 there last year. He's been great in this tournament the last couple of years. He's putting phenomenally. But I'm gonna try to get past that trepidation. Just take Justin Thomas. He's still the best out there in this. I have him as phrase the second best in this field. He just the way he obliterated the course last year. He's obviously comfortable there. I'm not too worried about the caddy thing. I like how he bounced back from his last from the CIMB to win the CJ Cup the next time. Hope he can kind of do that again after being a mild disappointment at last week. Although he did have that final round 67, blistering back 9, I think 5 under for the last 8 holes.
All right, so hey, why not? I mean, just because look, 8-1 is that's the bonus you get with some of the difficulty and some of the other things to consider that where you might be, well, I don't know. But then you take a look at the fact and you go, wait a second, I got one of the best players in the world in a field that is not top heavy at 8-1. And that's a good number. So, Jeff, means the top 3 players are off the board. Jordan Spieth at 5-1, Justin Thomas at 8-1, Mark Leishman at 14-1. The next group, I mentioned Brian Harman. He's 20-1 along with Kevin Kisner. Then you've got Cameron Smith. I know you've taken him lately. He's at 28-1. Russell Henley, the 2013 champ, is at 28-1, as is Tony Finau, and 09 champ Zach Johnson. So that's those are the next group of players as far as the odds are concerned. Any of those players you take in number 2?
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking along the lines that Joel was, where it was going to come down to do you take Harman or do you take Kisner? Those are the next 2 guys on my list, and I probably even had them a little bit above Thomas just based on recent form. And Brian Harman has just really performed extremely well. Not only the second half of last year, but has now carried it over into 2018. This is going to be a course that fits him better. He was trying to keep up with Dustin Johnson. Everybody was trying to keep up with Dustin Johnson, but again, you take him out of the equation, he's right there amongst everybody else in the chase pack at a course that doesn't really fit him. Now he's coming to a course that's shorter, will highlight his putting and his iron game. He doesn't have to bomb it out there, and he's coming off a great performance on a course that isn't a great fit for him. So Brian Harman's going to be my pick.
Yeah, I would have definitely grabbed Harman if you didn't take him because, look, he's just too hot right now. He's got 4 straight top 10s. I don't even think Brian Harman has ever had this run before. I mean,
not to this extent. Definitely not.
So he's on top of his game, and this is going to be a huge year for Brian Harman. We know that he had a nice season last season. Of course, what was it? The U.S. Open, he made a name for himself, right? That was
exactly.
So that when he finished runner up there, even though Koepka was cruising to the win, Harman, runner up at the U.S. Open is a major deal there. But the thing that really was significant is he went from the 141st player in the world to the 27th player in the world. He had never been lower than 86th. So that's the kind of year he had. And there's no reason for me to think that he can't get into the top 20, top 15, maybe even top 10. What kind of a player is Brian Harman, Jeff, as far as his pedigree? What is it that, is it college and expectations? Is this something that you could have seen coming a few years ago?
The talent's always been there. He was one of the best junior players of all time. I mean, he won more junior events or significant junior events than just about anybody. And obviously the junior game's kind of changed a little bit in the last 10 years and all that. But he was multiple AJGA Player of the Year. Went to college at Georgia, played reasonably well there on a great team, and so he was never really a standout there. And I think the other part of that is Brian Harman stopped growing, and he was a long player as a junior and a pretty long player as a collegian, but all these power hitters have gone by him. I still think Brian Harman is long enough, but he's also been savvy enough to hone his short game, and he might be one of the best putters on tour.
All right. Let's see. Next up, I am going to grab a player that I had last week, just like with Leishman, and that's going to be Siwoo Kim. I thought Kim played well. He played here a couple years ago. He finished 4th, and we've talked about his game is all about being healthy. And now all of a sudden he's got a couple top 10s over his last 3 events. So he's healthier. We're seeing it on the golf course. He had a really good showing here a couple years ago. He's a very young and talented player, one of the more young and talented players in this field. So I'm going to go ahead and take Siwoo Kim at 33-1 as my second pick. Joel, what are you going to do now? I guess, does that mean Kisner's your man?
Yeah, I think so. I have him a decent amount ahead of the next guy. He, at 20-1, he was pretty close between he and Harman. I think a good argument for either. But Kisner clearly loves this course. He's been top 5 the last 2 years. He had a 60 in the 3rd round. Kind of a small sample size this season so far, but his putting has been fantastic. I think he's a pretty excellent fit. Second round, good pick.
Is there anything that we've seen when you take a look at stats with big hitters as opposed to some of the shorter hitters on tour, the little guys? Have you noticed anything? Because it doesn't really seem like there. I mean, we do have Tony Finau that I've mentioned, but I don't notice a particular amount of bombers on this golf course. Is that by accident?
Well, it's a smaller course. I mean, they don't really need those bombers. I mean, there's still some bombers of them who have played really well here. We saw Jamie Lovemar did great last year. Gary Woodland has a fantastic history here too. But I feel like for the most part, it's been like some good hitters, but yeah, not many of the bombers seem to be coming to this course. Maybe that is on purpose. They know, they know that it kind of negates a little bit of their strength, but.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then why not? Why play here? You don't have to. It's Hawaii, especially if you don't make it to Kapalua. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about taking some of the bigger hitters. Is that something that you'll avoid this week, Jeff?
Well, I think that if you look at how players and courses fit, like Justin Thomas. He's a bomber. He set the course on fire last year, so
That's
it
true.
can be done.
That's true.
But
he's a great player too. That's the difference.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Would you be concerned about taking Tony Finau? Would you because Finau, of course, that's the thing. He's a big hitter, yet he's playing really well. 26th or better in his last 6 events, 3 top 10s, runner-up. He's been better here. Each time he's played here just about. So would you be concerned about taking him, though, because of, would you say, okay, well, 20th last year, okay, that's good, but I don't know if I could see him winning this event?
Well, I think that's it. I think Tony Finau will probably play very well. But as we've been talking about, there are a lot of other players whose skill set matches this course a little bit better, that I like a little bit better than Tony Finau. I mean, if we went deep enough into the draft, one of us is going to take him. And Tony Finau is a smart enough player to realize that he's going to have to keep the driver in the bag a little bit more often, take a few more 3-woods off the tee, shape some shots, and play course management golf. But it's not really an indictment of Finau as it is an endorsement of other players who are shorter hitters and maybe better technicians with the irons and around the green.
All right. So your third pick, Jeff, you've got Spieth and Harman. So far, we are 6 for 6 on players that played last week. Are you going to keep that trend going?
Yes, I am. And it's a guy who if you look at it, may think that he had a disappointing finish last week because he was right in the middle of the pack at 17. But that was the first time Cameron Smith had been at Kapalua, another player who maybe doesn't fit that course all that well. And you go back to the end of 2017, and his last 5 starts worldwide, 3 on the PGA Tour and then 2 in his native Australia, were all top 12s. 4 of them were top 5s, and he finished his year with a win at the Australian PGA Championship. So I still think he carries some momentum, and now he's going to a place where it's going to match up better.
All right, so another stab at it for Cameron Smith. Nobody's taken Cameron Smith more on this show than you have, so hopefully you'll get him when he wins for the first time on the PGA Tour.
Second.
He does have a win on how long ago was that? That was a couple years ago?
The Zurich. No,
that was the team event.
Oh, the team event. Yes, okay. All right.
Yeah, it was Blitz.
Yeah. All right, this first PGA Tour win, singles win. This first PGA singles win. Okay. All right. And I'm going to stick with the trend. I'm going to go 8 for 8 by going, and I'm actually going to go 3 for 3 with players that I went with last week. I'm going with Berger at 33-1. Berger, he seems to be trending in the right way. I know he doesn't have a great history here. He's made 3 cuts. That's fine. He's made the last 3 cuts. That's fine. 13th a few years ago, so that's fine. But again, as I mentioned last week, very talented player, and I like the fact that he's trending in the right direction. He has been playing pretty well over his last 5 events. So especially the last three, that's what I'm concerned with more than anything. 24th at the WGC, 14th Hero, 11th Tournament of Champions. So he's playing okay. Now he's not playing where I know he can play, but if he can find himself into the top 10 this week, get off to a good start, which he got off to last year. I think he started off 65 last year. So if he get off to another good start, maybe that'll get his confidence going. A player that definitely has what it takes to continue the rise, which he has been. He has improved his ranking, his world ranking, every year since turning pro in 2013. 53rd, including 2015, then dropped to 34th in 2016, 28th last year. So we can definitely see Berger maybe as a top 20 player this year, maybe more. All right. Joel, will you continue the trend of 8 straight players from last week?
I will not, but first of all, I would have been all over Cameron Smith if he was there. He's basically had one bad round in the last 3 months, and even last week he still played 10 under over those last 3 rounds. Just got off to a poor start at a course that's usually pretty rough for first timers. I think he's fantastic odds at 28-1, but I like Finau this week. You're talking about whether he's a bomber or not. He can do more than hit rockets now. He's hitting greens. He's putting much better. He's been very consistent. He looks really close to. Well, I mean, he had that win in Puerto Rico, so I guess it's kind of like the Cameron Smith thing. Does he have a real win? But yeah, he
well, he likes the
close.
islands. He likes playing on islands, so maybe this is a good. Maybe he's comfortable there. He likes the palm trees.
Yeah, I wish he had played last week because that seems to be an important factor. But that's not enough of a detriment for me to pass up on him. I think his overall game is too good. I like how many greens he's hitting right now.
All right. Yep.
Good form
and nobody's picked Tony Finau more in this show than you have. So hopefully he'll get it done when you do pick him. Okay, so that does leave now our long shot pick. These are players that are 50-1 or higher in the field. So Jeff, anybody? Do you have a group of guys? Do you have a couple of guys? Definitely one you like?
Well, I managed to winnow it down fairly quickly, and I don't know, maybe it's just because he jumped out to me with some odds that I think are much longer than they should be. Chris Stroud, didn't exactly set Kapalua on fire, but he finished just outside the top 10 and was incredibly consistent with 372s and a 66. Again, not a bomber, probably coming to a course that's a little bit more his style, and he's 90-1 this week. I'll take him.
Okay, so you're offended by those odds.
I'm a little surprised for a guy that finished just outside the top 10. Usually that brings a certain amount of bounce. If his name was Thomas or Fowler or something like that, it would have definitely brought a bounce in the odds. But when I saw him at 90-1, I actually had to go back and check the scores. Didn't he finish where I thought he finished? Yes, he did.
All right, there you go. Chris Stroud, 90-1, another player from last week. So Finau is the only player so far on our board that we have not taken, that we have taken that did not play last week. Okay, I have. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and take a player that I have been taking more than any of you guys. He is just on the cutoff mark, and that's Ollie Schneiderjans. So he's definitely been somebody I've been shooting after. We'll go for it one more time. 27th year last year, 50-1 shot. What do you think about Ollie Schneiderjans, Joel?
I mean, 50-1. That seems a pretty good bet for a long shot. He played well last year. He had a little consistent down the stretch last year, but I remember he had that one really good tournament, the Wyndham, I think it was, where he finished second. He looks like one of those guys. He looks like he's close to finally breaking through. It could be here. This is a good course for him.
Yeah, that's the reason why I keep picking him, because he has been playing pretty well. I know he missed the cut at the RSM, but before that he had 3 straight top 25s. Wyndham a couple months ago he was runner-up. So he's got the lone professional win in the Web.com tour in 2016. And what about Schneiderjan's his overall talent, Jeff? Where's his ceiling?
I think he's got a very high ceiling, and we only started to see it from about the midpoint last year when he started getting comfortable on tour. He's a former NCAA champion. He's a guy that in college was qualifying for the U.S. Open and things like that. He's got a lot of talent. He got detoured a little bit coming out of college. He had a bad week in Web.com tour qualifying, and that set him back for about a year. But he's overcome it very well. And again, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on Schneiderjans now.
Yeah, he had that. I think we first really started taking notice of him on the PGA Tour when, or not necessarily the PGA Tour, but really just nationally when he played well at the Open Championship in 2015. I think wasn't he in contention at first couple of days or maybe on Saturday or something like that? I know he finished in the top 15 in that event. So, all right. Joel?
That was a big event for amateurs that year.
Was that when we had like 6 or 7 names that came out of nowhere?
Yeah, remember Paul Dunn was tied for the lead going in the final round at St. Andrews 2 years ago.
All right. Joel, who do you like? Who's your long shot?
Listen, Netherlands probably won't come as a surprise. I've picked them a decent amount in this thing. I actually have this guy ranked number 3 overall on my
Let me guess. Can I guess? Oh, you already ranked him? Okay, he's on the board.
Yeah,
I would have said Griot.
No, Ches Reavie.
Yeah, there's another one. Sure, you're taking him a bunch too.
I absolutely love him on this course. He's just been so consistent. He's been very accurate. He's not getting very many bogeys. He's someone who's shown that he can go really low, which at a course like this is important. And at 66 to 1 odds, his tee to green game has just been so good lately. He looks so close to me to finally winning one. And I want to make sure I have him when he does.
All right. Smart.
He's been contending every week, just outside the top 10. I think he's close to pulling this off.
Yeah, and his best finish here was last year.
Yeah,
so,
high 8th, I believe.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, because I actually like Griot too, by the way. That's the reason I even mentioned him, because he seems like maybe he's playing a little bit better than he had a bad drought for a while. But I picked him an awful lot about a year and a half ago, and I know you started to pick him as a long shot not too long ago. So, but he is playing better, and probably a big week for him in this field to see if he can follow up that 9th place finish from his last outing.
His talent is certainly better than you would expect for a typical 80 to 1 shot.
Correct. Yeah, in this field. So definitely somebody to watch. And hey, we have an alternate long shot pick still to go. All right, Jeff. So your alternate number 1 player, if Jordan Spieth, Brian Harman, or Cameron Smith does not tee it off tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning Hawaii time.
Well, it maybe is no surprise for longtime followers of the show, but he usually winds up on my list somewhere.
Charles
at
Howell.
YLA. Charles Howell. He's done everything at YLA but win.
Yeah.
And he's got 4 top 10s in his last 6, and one of those other 2 was 13th. He was runner-up at least once in his previous appearances. Kind of like what Joel was saying about Reavie. You know, when Charles Howell finally wins at YLA, I want to make sure I've got him.
He's got 7 top 5s there, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. And he's the 3rd all-time money winner at YLA without having won the tournament.
Yeah, so 40 to 1, not a bad. I mean, put a buck on him for crying out loud. Charles Howell III. No, he hasn't won though in a long time. That's the trick. But if he's going to win anywhere, you would think that this would be the place.
This would be a good one.
All right, I have Leishman, Kim, and Berger. So my alternate, my number uno alternate, I'm going to go ahead and take someone that I have been taking quite a bit lately as well. So I will go with Zach Johnson, the 09 champ at 28 to 1. Zach's been playing a little bit better lately, 4 straight top 25s. And he's got back-to-back top 10s here, 3 out of his last 4, and again a win here. So I'll take Zach as my number one alternate at 28-1. I was also thinking, Joel, about taking maybe Webb Simpson. I don't know, you've taken Webb a lot lately too, Jeff. He's finished 13th here 3 straight years. He does have a top 10 here, but he's been pretty good here. He is playing better, so he's not a bad idea as well. He was probably the guy that I would have taken if I didn't take Zach, Joel.
Yeah, he's someone.
Who do you like better? Who would you take, Webb or Zach?
Between those two, Zach, just because of the course history.
Okay.
They're both pretty similar. I mean, I think they're ranked pretty similar on here.
Is there any reason for us to worry about his WD at the RSM?
No, that was a family issue. His father was very ill. I believe he passed away since then.
His father was dying. He passed away over Thanksgiving weekend, and so it was very prudent for Webb to WD and go spend his last days with his dad.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to put something on him this week, even though he's not on my official picks. He's got 6 top 20s in his last 8, and 3 of those are top 10s. So, but I just like, again, and I think Jeff, so you agreed with me. What about you, Jeff? Who would you go with, Zach or Webb?
Well, that's a close one. It might be a sentimental thing, but between the two, I was leaning toward Webb in making my list.
Okay. Joel, who's your alternate?
Well, lately I've been taking Duffner in this spot, and I think he's a good possibility. You have to go some a little better course history, though. Gary Woodland's been quiet lately since he had that 4th place finish at the Canadian Open. He's the last 3 years. He's T6 last year, T13 the year before, T3 before that. He just seems to really like this course. His form, around the greens, he's just been an absolute disaster late in the season. But he's had 2 months to work that out. I know he knows how to chip. Hopefully he fixed whatever was going on there. He seems pretty safe for this course.
Yeah, he plays well there. Yeah. 3 straight top 15s. 6th last year, 3rd in 2015. So, yeah, this is a good place for Gary Woodland as your top alternate at 40-1. All right, now it is second long shot time. So if anything happens to Stroud, who is your alternate long shot, Jeff?
I think I'm going to take a flyer on somebody who he's a PGA Tour rookie, had a couple of good starts at the end of the fall, including 5th at the WGC in China, where he qualified based on his European Tour ranking, and followed that up with 2 more top 10s. This is his first start of 2015, but I like what Peter Uihlein has been trending, to the end of last year. Let's see if he can continue it on home soil.
All right, another player that you have gobbled up lately. In this spot, so we'll find out what kind of so again, this is his first. This is 2018 is the first time he's ever been on the PGA Tour for a year.
Yeah, because he finally was able to get membership based on his performance through the European Tour. Another kid who was the number 1 ranked junior in the country for a couple of years. U.S. amateur champion while he was at Oklahoma State, hit a bump in qualifying for the Web.com tour, and took the Brooks Koepka route. He and Koepka spent a lot of time together on the European tour, where instead of going down to the mini tours, they went to the European Challenge Tour and worked their way up from there to the main European tour. Koepka's progress was a little bit faster, but Uihlein has now also achieved PGA Tour membership through that door.
All right. I am going to grab as my. I don't know if I have taken him. It's been years, but I think if I'm going to take him, I'm going to do it now as my second alternate long shot pick, and that's Brian Gay at 100-1. Gay has traditionally played well on this golf course, and he's trending in the right direction. Last time out, he was 3rd at the RSM. And, of course, just disappeared. What was he having any sort of when because he didn't play an awful lot. Obviously, he had the an injury situation in 2015, Jeff?
Yeah, he had a neck injury that plagued him for a long time, and he's really lost 3 or 4 years off his career. because of one injury or another. And we finally saw what he could do once again when healthy, when he was able to play through his medical extension, keep his card, and then keep his card into this year as well.
Yeah, he was third at Barbasol, third at RSM, which was the last event he's played. And this is somebody that after that bad injury in 2015, just came out of 2016 ranking 759th in the world. But last year moved all the way up to 198. So that was a really nice rebound season for him. And again, if I'm going to take him, I think this is a spot for me to take him. Joel, what are you going to do with your second alternate long shot pick?
Well, Gay was one I was looking at for triple-digit odds. It's hard to do better than him. He's had 3 top 25s recently. Looks like he's coming back around. Kind of want to throw some love to Jimmy Walker based on his course history, but I just can't do it yet. I'm gonna go with someone else who ended last year well. That's JJ Spawn at 66-1 odds. His last three tournaments all in November. He went T10 at the Shriners, T14 at the OHL, and then was runner-up at the RSM. Played in the last group, a late one in the year two. I believe it's the one Cantler one.
Okay.
He's been one of the best approaching the green over this early season. At least ranked 10th in that. Everyone's just had so much. His playing partners have always had so much good to say about how he's hitting it straight too. So I think he's someone who's probably going to break through soon, and hopefully he's stayed fresh over this last month.
Yeah, Jimmy Walker, Jeff, the back-to-back champ in 2014-2015. Of course, we had talked recently, just a couple of years ago, about how much Jimmy Walker loved playing in the beginning of the season, and this was why. He would get off to these really big starts, but then he kind of disappeared for a while. He didn't get off to a really good start a couple years ago, but then came out of nowhere to win the PGA. But he just hasn't been overall the same player the last couple of years that he was when he did win back-to-back here in 2014, 2015, and now he's recovering from Lyme disease.
Yeah, and I was going to say, remember that he's still in the recovery process from Lyme disease, which he first started feeling the effects of about this time last year. He started feeling bad over the Christmas holiday 2 Christmases ago. And it took them a long time to figure out what the fatigue and the fog was caused by. And it wasn't until the eve of the Masters that he was able to get it diagnosed from a doctor. And so they've tried to figure out the right antibiotic situation for him. You can go on to his wife's blog, PGA Tour Travels, or Tour Wife Travels, I'm sorry, and get a more detailed description from Aaron Walker. But basically, they put him on an antibiotic treatment, which kind of backfired because one of the side effects is that you burn real easy in the sun. And so playing golf on those antibiotics wasn't working out too well. So they've had to adjust and go with a different set of antibiotics and a cycle process. And I read an interview where he says that he's finally starting to feel like he's coming out of it. But, this is now 8 months since he was diagnosed. It's a really, really long recovery procedure from Lyme disease. And so I think we'll start to see better play gradually from Jimmy Walker in 2018, but he is still in recovery mode. Here's a real sad note. His wife also revealed in her last blog post that she now also has developed Lyme disease, and she's now going to start undergoing treatment for that. So talk about getting hit with a double barrel.
Yeah, I wonder whose fault that is. So
that's pretty rare where they live in that part of the country too.
Yeah, well, but golfers go all over the world, and who knows where it was picked up. It also might have been picked up by Jimmy on a hunting trip. With Erin, the possibility is, she walks pretty much every step of the tour with her husband. And so she could have easily contracted it in the long grass out there somewhere along the way. But kind of a real interesting scenario with the two of them now both trying to recover from Lyme disease.
Yeah, Jimmy, after the win at PGA, he had a third at Deutsche Bank a few weeks later. And since then, when he was 15th in the world, just one top 10. That was at the Tournament of Champions at the limited field. And his ranking has dropped all the way down to 55th. Year-end ranking of 68th. And he hasn't been that low since 2012. So we'll see if Jimmy can get going again. And because how old is he? Late 30s?
Mid-30s.
Okay. So he's still got the prime of his career to bounce back from. Okay, so all our picks are in. Now, as far as other players that we were all considering that we left off the board, and by the way, the non-long shots that we did, there's only one player we didn't mention from the non-long shots, and that's your boy Xander Schauffele, Joel, at 33-1. So we mentioned everybody else. And I as far as some of the long shots, I mean, again, Lovemark is somebody you have to consider, even though he's not coming in as far as in form. But the 4th and the 7th back-to-back trips to this golf course has to be considered at 55-1. Then you've got, we mentioned Grillo is somebody that I like. I think further on down, there are 3 other players at 100-1 I like. I was considering Brian Stewart. He's playing better golf. He's got 2 top 10s here. Patrick Rogers, who I always like to consider, but just because of his talent. And Luke List might also be somebody to consider at 100-1. Notable is Jerry Kelly, the now Champions golfer. No surprise that he's playing this event because, boy, when he plays here, he usually finishes well. He's got a boatload of top 10s. And a bunch of top 5s. He won this thing in 2002. So he's at 150-1. Joel, what about you?
Stuart Sink is another one I was thinking of, 125-1 odds. Those are pretty good for he had a bit of a comeback season last year. And he seems comfortable here. Ryan Armour at 90-1. He looked pretty good last week. He didn't look like, at the very least, he didn't look like he didn't belong there. He kind of came in late with one of the smaller tournaments. There's only 2 left I was strongly considering. I keep wanting to throw Bo Hoffler in there, even though he's been awful lately. But at some point soon he's just going to go on some kind of tear, and I could see it being a field like this.
Okay, Jeff.
Well, one player from the non-long shots that didn't get any mention, but I'll take care of that here, is the guy that held the scoring record before Justin Thomas obliterated it last year, and that's Russell Henley, who was in his very first start on the PGA Tour back in 2013, was 2 shots off the PGA Tour scoring record. And so he's coming back to a place where he's comfortable, but as I kind of mentioned with Justin Thomas, hasn't really come back and gone low at Waialae. But he's at 28-1 off the long shot category. I took a look at Bo Hossler. That's a talent look, kind of like with Patrick Rogers. We know eventually they're going to rise up and come through. William McGirt had a nice finish to calendar year 2017. We'll see if he can keep it going in his first start of calendar year 2018. And then I'm going to throw in a name that if you read Around the Tours, if you read last week's edition of Around the Tours, and I was talking about who got into the top 50 and who got Masters invitations, you might have seen the name Yusako Miyazato, who got the Masters invitation at number 50 in the world. And he got there by being the leading money winner on the Japan Golf Tour. He's the older brother, by the way, of now retired LPGA star Ai Miyazato. So he's got the spotlight all to himself. He's doing pretty well. And, this is kind of an event that attracts a half dozen or so Japanese players through sponsor exemption. But the way he played in 2017, you never know. You might see him on Sunday.
All right. And by the way, as you mentioned, McGirt played well at the end of the season. He had a better finish in his final his final 5 events. So after missing the cut at the Wyndham, he got better in his last 5 events, including 3 straight top 25s and back-to-back top 10s. So if McGirt keeps up the trend, then he could be in for a top 5 this week. May not be a bad fantasy player this week. Willie McGirt at 80-1. By the way, Hudson Swafford has 3 top 15s in his last 4 events here as well in that 80-1 category. Chris Kirk and Kevin Na have both played well here before. They're at 90-1. Kirk actually finished runner-up several years ago. And other notables, Luke Donald. What's going on with Luke Donald, who was runner-up here some years ago, Jeff?
Luke had to withdraw the night before the RSM Classic teed off because during the Pro-Am he experienced chest pain.
Okay.
And so they took him to the hospital. Tests turned up nothing. And I've seen situations like that before where something happens and the doctors just can't find the blip that caused it. But he's been given a clean bill of health and had the holidays to recover. So this is his first start since that scary situation in Sea Island.
All right. By the way, Luke Donald at 125-1. Keegan Bradley still looking to break his drought. He's at 80-1. And other notables, 2010 champ Ryan Palmer is at 125-1. And who else? I think we all expect Danny Lee to start picking it up as long as he's healthy. He's at 100.
Fabian Gomez, too.
What's that?
I said Fabian Gomez, too, won 2 years ago, 200-1 odds.
Yep, that's right. Just in 2016, won the playoff over Brant Snedeker. The only time he's really played well here, though, on the golf course. He's 200-1, as you mentioned. Vijay Singh, another former champ, is here. Another former champ, KJ Choi, is here. Mark Wilson is here. So those are some of the other notable names. And Sungmoon Bae is trying to make his comeback. So he's here as well at a very long shot at 300-1. What do we got going on next? What's up next? Hawaii is going to be in the rear view. So what are we previewing next week, Jeff?
Next week we go to the mainland part of the West Coast swing. And the first mainland event, at least for the past decade, probably 2 decades close to now, is the Old Bob Hope Tournament. They're going to Palm Springs for what's now the Career Builder Challenge. It is one of those pro-am type events, kind of like Pebble Beach. It's going to be played over 3 different golf courses. The main course is PGA West, a Pete Dye design that was so tough at one point that PGA Tour players actually voted to take that course out of the rotation for a certain period of time. But it's back in a whole new generation of players and probably a little bit softer, not so harsh conditions. But Jason Duffner is the defending champion there.
That was the one that, what was it, Hadwin was the one that scored low last year in that event? Or am I thinking of something else?
I think he did, and actually I take it back. Duffner didn't win last year. Hudson Swafford won last year's event. I think Duffner was the year before.
Yeah, and Hadwin had 60 or something like that last year?
Yeah, Hadwin had a 59, I thought it was that course. Am I thinking of a different one?
59? Hadwin?
I thought it was the Career Builder, but now I'm starting to doubt that a little bit. I think that's where it was.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I remember about.
I think it was like the week after Thomas did it. That would make sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Hadwin had a third round 59, but Swafford wound up passing him on Sunday to win by a shot.
All right. So that is because you actually beat me 2 years ago. You had Duffner. Who did I have? I had Lingmerth, right? 2 years ago.
Your memory's far better than mine.
Yes.
I remember I had Duffner.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's what it was. I remember that. That's when Duffner got that break when the ball, I think it was hit on the, remember, not the break, but he hit that crazy shot on the rocks. On what was it, 18? Is that 18?
Got a friendly carom.
And he shot that thing on the rocks, and it was crazy. But hey, you know what? That's something we'll talk more about next week. Okay, so Joel, don't forget to, for listeners out there, you can check out his Sony Open Primer report at ProGolfWeekly.com, and that includes a preview of this week's event, It's got the field in there, the records, overall history, so you can check that out. And Joel, you've also got a couple of new reports this week at ProGolfWeekly.com, including one that was posted a couple of days ago. That's the 3-up, 3-down feature. That's players that are trending following the Century event, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was, I mean, obviously, it was strongly focused on Dustin Johnson, but it's kind of talked, about some of the other, positives and disappointments. We had Brandon Steele was someone we all kind of thought was was a great fit for it. Talked a little more about John Rahm and Brian Harmon and all that. And we also have a ranking the field more elaborate top 10 for this week for the Sony Open 2 on ProGolfWeekly.com.
Is that where you rank? What do you rank the players in the field?
Yes, just for this tournament, yes.
So every week you'll have a ranking.
Yeah, every week. Yeah.
Okay, so it's sort of all right. So basically, it's just the players, your top 10 players of the week for that event.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So check that out at ProGolfWeekly.com, and where can we follow you on Twitter, Joel?
At Joel J. Cook on Twitter.
All right. Who do you follow, by the way? Do you follow? If we go to your Twitter account, will we see anything crazy?
I don't think so.
Donald Trump.
A lot of former Ohio State Buckeyes, probably. Other guys, most of that and other golfers.
All right.
But yeah,
you're following Nicholas, right? So that's a former Buckeye. It's a
that's true. He had something really good out this week too. I got to remember what that was. But it's Joel J. Cook on Twitter, and for the latest update commentary, and it will be back again next week for when it goes back to the mainland.
That's right. Looking forward to it. Joel, I appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. All right, that's Joel Cook, ProGolfWeekly.com. And Jeff, you also have your first look reports at PGAtour.com that come out every Friday. And your Around the Tours report that's posted here at PrimeSportsNetwork.com. That's where you can find a segment on Rory McIlroy and also previews of the other pro golf events around the world this week, including the European Tour that's back in action at both the BMW South African Open and the Eurasia Cup in Malaysia. So what's that about?
Well, it is it's the Ryder Cup that type event, I suppose, that allows Asia to participate. As the name suggests, it's a competition between Europe and Asia, 3-day Ryder Cup type competition. Now, they don't go double sessions on Friday and Saturday. It's one session of 4 balls and one session of 4 sums, whatever order on Friday and Saturday, and of course Sunday singles. But Asia's trying to come back from a very thorough drubbing 2 years ago when they lost. I think the final score was 19.5 to 5.5. And for the talent that is rising in in Asia, there's still a ways to go to catch up with the European squad. Although the European squad is almost completely turned over from 2 years ago when they had Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter and those guys. They've been replaced by Tommy Fleetwood and and Henrik Stenson.
Oh, yeah.
So Europe's going to be kind of strong anyway.
All right, Jeff. We'll talk to you next week. We'll follow you at Jeff Shane. So thanks as always. And that's it for the show. Don't forget to check out our Prime Sports Network on-demand shows within hours following every live broadcast on this website and on our iTunes and YouTube pages under Prime Sports Network. And again, follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. That's where you receive our on-demand programming alerts. We'll see you next Wednesday and every Wednesday right here on the Prime Sports Radio Network.